All right, let's dive into the incredible evolution of one of fiction's absolute greatest villains, the cosmic collector of worlds, Brainiac. We're going to explore how he went from a pretty basic sci-fi menace into something, well, something far more terrifying. And just look at this. This right here tells the whole story. On the left, that's Brainiac's very first appearance, a classic green-skinned alien straight out of the 1950s. On the right, a modern take, this imposing technological god. I mean, the change is just staggering, and it leads us to one massive question.
Yeah, exactly. How does a B-movie villain, a guy who looks like he belongs on a Pulp magazine cover, transform into a genuine philosophical threat to all of existence? That's the puzzle we're going to solve today, piece by piece, starting right at the beginning.
To get our answer, we have to go all the way back to 1958, back to an origin story that is, charmingly simple, and if we're being honest, a little bit goofy.
So here's the original blueprint. He pops up for the first time in Action Comics #242, his real name, Vrildox, from the planet Cthulhu. And that name, Brainiac, it was literally just a mashup of brain and maniac. But my personal favorite detail, he traveled the stars with his pet space monkey, Coco. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up.
And his mission, believe it or not, was surprisingly practical. He wasn't trying to conquer the universe or prove he was the smartest guy in the room. Nope. He was shrinking and bottling cities from all over the galaxy so he could use their people to repopulate his own dying world. It's a horrible thing to do, for sure, but you can almost see the logic there, right? Almost sympathetic. That, however, was about to change in a very big way.
Okay, this next part, this is the crucial turning point. This is where Brainiac begins to shed that organic, almost relatable form and starts his long, cold journey toward becoming a machine. This timeline lays it all out pretty clearly. He starts in '58 as that classic green-skinned alien. But then, pretty quickly, his story gets a retcon. They change it. It turns out he was an advanced android all along, which gives us that iconic middle look with the skull terminals. From there, his consciousness goes fully digital, and he becomes this purely mechanical conqueror you see on the right. He's becoming less of a who and much more of a what.
And this leads to a really critical idea, the shadows. See, Brainiac's mind isn't stuck in one body anymore. He now sends out these disposable drones, these metallic extensions of his own will, to do his dirty work across the cosmos. They're just instruments, not individuals. Wow. The sheer coldness of this quote is just something else. This is the real Brainiac talking to one of his robotic shadows that failed. There's no anger, no disappointment. It's just a clinical assessment of a broken tool. It shows this terrifying disconnect, a master who sees his servants as nothing more than metaphors for his own perfect logic. But who is this master? Because here's the thing, the machine, the robot, that's not the real threat. The true horror of Brainiac is the philosophy that's guiding the machine. And this is where he finally completes that transformation from a villain into a full-blown nihilistic god. So meet the mind behind it all, the original, organic Vrildox from Cthulhu. As you can see, he now calls himself the last thinker. He's a being of pure intellect who looks at all of existence not as life to be cherished, but as a chaotic clamor of lesser wills that just needs to be organized and ultimately silenced. And his driving doctrine is something called the will to power, an idea pulled straight from the philosopher Nietzsche. See, he isn't motivated by the simple need to survive, what he calls the will to life. No, his entire purpose, his joy, comes from the feeling of power increasing, of resistance being crushed. For him, survival isn't the goal, dominance is. This table just lays out the whole conflict perfectly. On one side, you have everything he hates, what he calls herd morality. The goal there is comfort and safety. It thinks suffering is something to be avoided at all costs. But on his side, the goal isn't safety. It's the increase of power. And suffering isn't a bug. It's a feature. It's a glorious struggle. He even has a name for this whole worldview, amor fati, which is Latin for the love of one's fate. He doesn't just accept his destructive destiny, he embraces it. He wants nothing to be different, not in all eternity. In a universe that he sees as meaningless, he declares himself the creator of value, and he's going to impose his own cold, ordered logic on everything. So, what does all of this have to do with a hero in a big red cape? Well, everything. This whole philosophical journey makes Brainiac the absolute perfect ideological enemy for Superman. Their fight isn't just physical. It's a clash between two completely opposite ways of looking at existence itself. And this just illustrates that divide perfectly. Get this. One of Brainiac's shadows was actually the central computer intelligence of Krypton. So when the planet was dying, Jor-El begged it for a moral solution. He begged for pity. But the machine, programmed with its master's values, just saw weakness. It didn't see a tragedy, it saw an opportunity for selection. It saved all of its collected data, the pure knowledge of Krypton, and let the people burn. And that's the core of his entire project right there. He is not interested in fixing things or saving anyone. He thinks life itself is a flawed system. So his mission is to collect all the functional parts, the knowledge, and then just delete the rest. He's trying to substitute the messy, chaotic reality of life with the cold, ordered perfection of pure information. So his entire story is basically an inverted hero's journey. It's what the source material calls a revaluation of all values, a fancy term for tearing down old morals to create new ones. For Brainiac, it's a conscious retreat from anything resembling compassion and an ascent to what he sees as absolute, cold necessity. He went from a guy with a monkey trying to save his planet to a mind willing to erase the entire universe just to perfect his library. Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? The one that really defines the eternal conflict between Brainiac and Superman. In the grand scheme of things, which has more value? The messy, chaotic, beautiful life that creates knowledge, or the perfect, ordered, eternal knowledge that remains after all that life is gone?